Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to welcome our next presenter, Captain Jim Hutton, OBE, Royal Australian Navy. Captain Hutton has served for over 40 years in the Royal Navy, Royal Marines and Royal Australian Navy. He came to Australia in 2011 on loan from the Royal Marines to help develop the new amphibious capability. He transferred to the Royal Australian Navy in Jan 2015. His career to date has seen him serve frequently as a commander and leader at many levels across multiple exercises, deployments and operations. A qualified executive coach, he coaches Navy leaders and also holds a range of complementary qualifications that support his life purpose. His career highlights include planning and executing amphibious operations into Sierra Leone in 2000 and the amphibious assault into Olfor Peninsula in 2003, as well as commanding the Joint Task Group that completed Indo-Pacific Endeavour in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Captain Jim Hutton.
A few familiar faces out there. Great, feels like coming home. If you want to be an innovative, opportunistic and failure-tolerant leader, you better have thought about what that means first. What sort of leader will you have to be to achieve that? How will it feel to be such a leader? How will you be looked at by your superiors, your peers, and your subordinates if you exhibit those characteristics? Straight away, you might be thinking, oh, in my workplace, that could be quite tough. And I might challenge you to think about the culture in your workplace. Is it conducive to accepting of the innovative, opportunistic, and failure-tolerant leader? So I'm Jim Hutton. You know my background. I'm here today to share my thoughts and my experiences from a life on the other side of the world on this subject. Next slide, thanks. I believe that human motivation is at the heart of this topic. Your motivation is shaped by your organisational culture and the 5 fundamentals of human motivation shown there. You enjoy what you do, and you know that your effort can make a difference. What you do is meaningful, and that you're learning. And most of all, important of all, is that you're supported by those around you. If you're motivated, then you perform well, and you create the conditions for innovation. Next slide. Creativity is new to you, but innovation is new to the world. I think this is a reasonable way of describing the difference between creativity and innovation. I believe that you have to have creativity and innovation in the workplace, you need to have a culture that promotes it. And we've heard that already. A culture that empowers people at all levels to think beyond the now. Empowerment of your people is so important. It gives them the confidence to go beyond their job description. It allows for succession planning, and it gives empowered followers and junior leaders permission to think. In May 1942, the then Prime Minister of Australia commenced his weekly address to the nation with the following observations. He said, "One of the many troubles, I was going to say of democracy, but perhaps I should say of ourselves as an Australian people, is that we do not think enough. And we take too many astonishing things for granted." He then went on to mention A.A. Milne, the author, the man that designed or invented Winnie the Pooh, who put into Pooh's mouth the quote there, "Sometimes I sits and think, and sometimes I just sits." Who are you? Which one are you? Do you just sit? Or do you sit and think? Sometimes we're all too busy to think, but you need to make time to think. If you don't think, there is nothing creative or innovative produced. What culture do you promote as a leader? Do you encourage your team to think? Are you receptive to their thoughts? Do you create time to think, or are you endlessly busy? How do you get your subconscious mind to think? When you get your people to think, do you listen? Are you receptive to their thoughts? Are you planting enough seeds in your own head and allowing your mind to process your ideas? Or are you just constantly reacting and shooting from the hip? Thinking people get results. I recall an invasion of Al Faw as we sat in our trenches just before we went in. We knew we were facing three enemies: the Coast Watchers, the binoculars in the towers, the Iraqi army, and then the Fayadeen, the extremists, the people who were prepared to die for their cause. Our rules of engagement said we could kill all of them. But that wasn't the end of the story. We knew that once we were gone, the Iraqi army would maintain the peace and security of the nation. If we killed them all, there wouldn't be peace and security for that nation. So that required the Marines to think about courageous restraint. They had to go and advance to contact and allow the foe to engage first. We would hit our belt buckles, let them run out of ammunition, and then we'd take the surrender. That way they didn't lose face. They did what they could, but ultimately they gave in. That took courage. That required thinking people to make those decisions. Finally, what culture do you promote as a leader? Do you ask for ideas from your men and women? Do you actively listen to them, to what they're saying? Or do you just go along because you're the boss and then give them what you were going to do anyway? If it's the latter, don't expect ideas next time you ask. Ideas lead to creativity and then to innovation. A couple of examples of creativity and innovation in combat. On the left-hand side there, we have a picture of two vehicles hit as a result of an ambush. Marine Thompson and his fire team were in those vehicles. They successfully debussed, grabbed their weapons, and ran for cover across a bridge. Unfortunately, they found, and this was a little bit of a failure on his part, that whilst he'd ran towards the enemy, he'd actually run across a bridge and into the field of fire where there was no way out. He assessed the situation, he took charge of it, he got his men to cover, and after a quick scour around, discovered that across the river, about 50 metres away, there was a rowing boat. So he ditched his kit, slung his weapon over his back, swam across the river, being an amphibian, picked up the rowing boat, brought it back, got his troops in, and they hand-paddled it back to safety, all under fire. Thinking, creativity, got out of a jam. On the right-hand side there, you'll see a pretty thin-skilled unarmoured vehicle, which is what all we had when we went to war, and it's got a wire cutter on the front of it. The corporate memory on wire cutters and IEDs slung under bridges had gone from the British forces because we were used to it in the days of Northern Ireland, because the IRA, or Irish Republican Army, would do that frequently against patrols. But once we finished Ireland, we took the wire cutters off and forgot all about it. Once we got intelligence that the Fayadeen were doing it, the old and bolds went, hey, we need to put wire cutters back on. And so we improvised. We didn't have them. We just got some wire pickets, welded them on. Being creative saved lives. On that theme, next slide, you have to make use of what you got. Those of you who have been amphibious or are going to be amphibious, as this army is, will know that when you deploy in a task group and you then get a mission, it's a come-as-you-are party. You're not going to come back to Australia, reload, and then go back out. You're going to go off the line of march to effect what needs to be done. That's what we found in Sierra Leone, as we were directed to Sierra Leone in 2000, on board HMS Ocean. The photograph on the right is a picture of a Lynx helicopter. In the magazines of the HMS Ocean, we had the tow missiles. But because the ship was so new, we had no mechanism, we had no SOP or drill to get the tow missile out the magazine and onto the rails of the Lynx helicopter. And when we asked back to the Permanent Joint Headquarters for permission to do it, guess what the answer was? Oh, no. On your own head be it, Royal. So, creative people made some safe plans, and we put the Lynx, the missiles on the helicopters. Boat groups. As we approached the theatre of operations, we realised that we had no hydrography ship. We had to do all of those tasks, which would routinely be done by hydrography officers and ratings in a navy, but we didn't have them. Our task group did not contain them. We had one hydrography officer, So we adapted. We used landing craft and rubber boats. We put the hydrographer in there. We surrounded them with armed Marines, and we went out and we did all of those tasks before D-Day, in the 3 days before D-Day. Again, thinking led to creativity, and we achieved our mission. Next slide. On the picture on the right there, again, about speeding up organisation adaptation, we needed to patrol the jungles of Sierra Leone once we'd achieved the relief in place with the paras that had been flown in earlier on to conduct the non-combatant evacuation. The UK forces had not flown over jungles since Borneo in the 60s. You couldn't find any drills or SOPs for it, and there weren't any old enough Marines or sailors around who'd done it. So we sent back and we got those SOPs and we dusted them off and we created the aviation patrol. Why? Because we didn't have a multi-role aircraft. We had Sea King that could lift people in stores. We had Lynx that you could arm up and shoot things with, and we needed Gazelle because it was the reconnaissance platform. But you put the three of them together, you have a capability. Again, thinking leads to creativity, and when needs must, you get it done. And that's it. Thanks. What I'd like to introduce you to is a thing called the Kynevin Framework, developed by, or attributed to David Snowden, who's, I think, a Welsh academic. In its simplest terms, it exists to help us realise that all situations are not created equal, and to help us understand that different situations require different responses to successfully navigate them. On the model that you can see on the right-hand side, in the obvious and complicated area, that is what we call the ordered side of the model. On the other side, the complex and the chaotic is the unordered side. And then slap bang in the middle, you have disorder. Now, where do you think combat is on this model? Right or left? Left. Okay, very much in the complex and chaotic domains. That's where the nasty stuff happens. We have learned that to achieve survival in chaos, you need to exploit opportunities and mitigate risk. Exploit opportunities and mitigate risk. In the complex and chaotic situations, the recommended actions are shown there. A complex situation, you probe, then you sense, then you respond. But in chaos, you act first, then you sense, and you respond. And I'll explain that. So let's take complex first. And it's very much the domain of what we call emergent solutions. Now, in the complex environment, there are a lot of unknown unknowns. You don't even know often the right question to ask. And even beginning to understand the problem requires experimentation. The final solution is often only apparent once you've got there, or you've discovered it. In hindsight, it always seems obvious, but it was not apparent at the outset. No matter how much time you spend in analysis, it's not possible to identify the risks or accurately predict the solution or the effort required to solve the problem. Now, the approach you take is to develop an experiment to gather more knowledge. Then you execute, and then you evaluate. As you gather more knowledge, you determine your next steps. Repeat as necessary, and with the goal of moving your problem into either the complicated domain, to the complicated domain where you can sense, analyze, and respond. Now, in the chaotic environment, the combat area, that's the domain of novel solutions. As the name implies, this is where things get a bit crazy. Things have gone off the rails, and an immediate priority is containment. An example might be getting wounded. Your initial focus is to correct the problem and contain the issue. Your initial solution might not be the best, but as long as it works, it's good enough. So once you've stopped the bleeding, you can take a breath and determine a real solution. Your approach is triage. Once you have a measure of control, you assess the situation and determine the next steps. You take action to remediate or move your problem into another domain. In disorder, the space in the middle, if you don't know where you are, you're in disorder. Priority one is to move yourself into a known domain. Understand the situation. So your approach there is to gather more information on what you know or identify what you don't know. Get enough information and move yourself to a more defined domain. So go back to the mantra, survival in chaos, is about exploiting opportunities and mitigating risk. As an opportunistic leader, you need to be alive to what you might do that will give you an advantage over an adversary whilst protecting yourself and your people, i.e. mitigating risk. An example of that might be the experience of Colour Sergeant Matt Tomlinson, Royal Marines, who earned a conspicuous gallantry cross for what I'm about to tell you, on the Euphrates River in Fallujah in 2004. Now, he was commanding, on exchange, a US Marine Corps assault force embarked on 4 small craft on a cordon and knock operation on the north bank of the Euphrates River near Fallujah at that time. As the patrol headed west near a railway bridge, the lead craft came under heavy small arms fire, followed by an all-out ambush of all craft. A numerically superior enemy in prepared positions engaged the waterborne patrol with rockets and assault rifles. Several near misses from the RPGs were enough to concuss one of the boat drivers and threaten the survivability of the craft. Now, Tomlinson immediately ordered his craft to turn inwards towards the enemy and surge towards the bank. So, in the chaos of the combat, he had acted. He saw an opportunity to mitigate the risk to his men by closing on the bank, getting into cover, and taking the fight to the enemy, which was the last thing they expected. He was first ashore. Breaking through the dense foliage, he immediately came face to face with the enemy, so he's seeing what's going on. His subsequent actions created an element of surprise, unhinged the enemy, and enabled a foothold to be established, which allowed the remainder of the platoon's assault force to get ashore safely and repel what was becoming a withering attack on the exposed patrol. He now took the time to sense what was going on. An intense firefight ensued, in which, despite the noise and the danger, he mustered his force, penetrated inland to encircle the enemy and prevent the insurgents regaining the initiative. He and his men engaged several enemy by using the irrigation ditches perpendicular to the river to cover their movement. During this manoeuvre, the enemy began to reinforce from the railway bridge. And Tomlinson sent a situation report and marked his forward position with smoke to better guide friendly suppressive fire from other boats in the river, thereby protecting the lives of his men. Now he responded. He issued quick battle orders for a decisive assault on the enemy position. He charged through, suppressed an RPG attack, and after 40 minutes of further fighting, he conducted an ammunition and casualty count, and that's when he realized his men were culminating. They were at the end of their tether at that point. So he radioed back to his platoon commander, his intent to withdraw 300 metres back to the riverside, which he then did under pressure from a reinforcing enemy. On reaching the riverbank, he once again marked his position, allowing forward air controllers to use the air support that had now come on station to have a huge impact on the enemy. He personally conducted the link-up with the boats on the river, and Tomlinson secured a landing site for the recovery of the assault force to cover the squad's withdrawal and re-embarkation as their ammunition started to run low. He was the final man off the beach, providing covering fire to his Marines before he embarked the craft, and ensured that all his personnel were accounted for. Company commander's forward air controller executed the break clean from the enemy using close air support, and the craft withdrew. So he found himself in chaos, he acted, he sensed, he responded. So, a bit about failure tolerance. Breakdowns can create breakthroughs. Things fall apart, so things can fall together. Again, this is telling us that even when things are going wrong, there are opportunities that you can exploit. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. An old saying, but still stands true. That should be your watchword. Your culture and your modus operandi if you're going to survive in chaos. I remember my first patrol as a troop commander in Belfast in 1981. I was very young, 20 years old. Most of my troop was fresh out of training, and only my corporals and sergeant, who wasn't on this patrol, had any experience. My corporal, Stabler, had 3 tours behind him. He knew the score. We're in a side street just off the Falls Road, and we come under effective fire from an IRA active service unit. Immediately we duck into the doorways, you know, giving it one of those while I think what I'm going to do. And I look across the street, and Stabler's in a kneeling position with his head down, and I wonder what he's up to. And as he lifts his head, he's got a clown's red nose on his face that he had stuck on. And of course, you can imagine the reaction of the other 15 of us in the patrol. Everyone just called down in laughter. I mean, there's bullets flying, but he just immediately settled everyone down because most of us were scared. It was our first contact, and it was like, oh, you know. But he just put this, yeah, I've been here before, fellas, don't worry about it, and you know, gave orders, and we cracked on. Was that a failure on his part? You could argue maybe it was. Was it countenance? Actually, it was exactly the right thing for that circumstance. You know, I took it off him afterwards, make sure it wasn't going to appear at any other stage in the tour, but, you know, at that moment in time, it did the job. Next slide, thanks. So here are five tips you might think about to overcome any major setback. First of all, acknowledge it. It's happened, okay. Eliminate blame. Don't be a victim, and don't look to blame someone else. Focus on the bigger picture. We've talked about vision before. Get back to your vision. Why am I here? What am I doing? Give yourself some time. Be patient. Don't be impatient. And explore a way forward. It's much healthier to explore a way forward rather than dwell on the setbacks that you've just had. Stephen Covey, who wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I'd recommend to you, said the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So when it all goes to hell in a handbasket, just remind yourself what the main thing is. Forget everything else. Get on with the main thing. So I'll cast my mind back to the mid-80s. I was in a troop that did maritime counter-terrorism for UK. And we're on an exercise in the English Channel. We're doing a boarding of a ship underway. It is the first time in UK's history that we'd actually ever used CH-47s for this task. Have we got any CH-47 crew people here? No? Okay. So it was the first time. Up until then, we'd use Sea Kings. Sea Kings were good at this task, but they only carried 10 to 12 operators. The Chinook let us take 40, and it's all about effect on target in an underway takedown. You want as many people there as quickly as possible. So this was the first time we're working it out. So picture the scene. It's the dead of night. We've got the Lynx with snipers and overwatch over the ship. There's 40 salters in the CH-47 that I'm in. I'm between the pilot and a co-pilot with a headset on, and we come in over the target. Vroom! The guys are emptying out, fast roping through the deck hatch and the side door. As I watch the last guy go, I ditch my headset, get on the rope, and slide down. As I'm reaching the deck of the ship, I look up, I lift my weapon, and I see flashes all over the superstructure just forward of where we've landed. I assume it's enemy, but then I'm aware of a huge shadow bearing down on me, and I glance up and I see the Chinooks falling on me, and I'm squashed, and then just poof, goes to the side and disappears into the dark. And I thought, oh, did he go in? I don't know. Anyway, I've got a job to do. So crack on. That pilot slid the Chinook about 3 miles sideways onto an adjacent airfield, which was the Navy base supervising the exercise. He landed the helicopter safely, did a damage assessment, ordered a car, drove 2 hours to his base, collected his number 1 uniform, drove 2 hours back, and was outside the Naval Base Commander's office at 8 o'clock in the morning, full dress, to explain why he had committed an error and flown into the back of the ship. The sparks I saw were his rotor head taking out the antennas on the back of the ship. So we were extremely lucky. But his action in admitting blame, taking fault straight away, it went away. We did not lose CH-47s for that exercise. You know, and I thought that was a great lesson to me as a young lieutenant. Wow, if a senior officer is going to just admit blame like that, that's role model behaviour, and was excellent. Okay, next slide. So what is your threshold for what is acceptable behaviour and what is not? Have you clarified your philosophy to your team? Where do you set your own personal bar? Is it too low? Is it high enough? Or is it too high? From the basic discipline of your people, how they behave in work and on a night out, you need to know what is acceptable, and you need to let them know. And stick by your guns. If your people don't know their boundaries, they will stray. If you don't give people enough rope, they can't do their job, but you know what happens when you give people too much rope. A couple of examples. My first engagement as company commander on 4-5 Commando, Commanding Zulu Company, we're on a commando exercise, and I'm given orders to lead the commando on a night yomp across the Scottish mountains of about 20 miles, full gear. I give the orders to the troops. I nominate 7 troops in charge. They're going to lead the commando. We get 2 hours into that yomp. I've been busy running up and down the line. I suddenly sort of take stock of where I am and realise we are not where we should be. So I was faced with a choice: go chew out the lieutenant, or go sort it out and get us back on. And you know, I'm getting this from the CEO, who was a mega navigator, and you can imagine the scene. Anyway, when I debriefed it afterwards, it was clear that my navigational standard and the lieutenant's navigational standard, there was a gap. So the only solution was for me to take them out and train them and get them up to my level, because then that way they knew everything I knew about navigation, were practiced at it, and became better. There was no point in me just chastising them, because I had like 12 more years of navigation practice than they had. So they were never going to be as good as I was. Fact. But my duty is to teach them and bring them up to my standard. Okay, last slide. So when youth departs, as I'm finding, may wisdom prove enough. For those of you who are in your 30s and beyond, if you did not gain the experience you desired by dint of circumstance, you didn't get that tour, or you didn't get that deployment, you need to read books, you need to watch films, you need to talk to those people who went, and you need to learn so that you can create your own wisdom. Creating the environment where your diggers are creative and innovative, make forgivable mistakes and admit to them, where they and you never fail to identify an opportunity that you can choose to seize or not, noting you can only die in a ditch once, is your business as leaders. Work on your team's culture, look for role models, and learn from them. If you want to chat more, last slide, there's my contact details. Look forward to the Q&A. Thank you very much.